Hello, everybody. I hope you had a great week. We're just going to do an episode of Enduring Ideal. Hopefully, it won't be too long this week. There's not a ton of things to go over, but I figured there was enough to just to do a stream. But like I said, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, this won't be particularly long, but it is what it is. Nothing I can do, but I digress. This is also the time I take to I don't know, just talk about other stuff that comes up that I might not have covered before. So we're going to talk about Kursk in a second, of course, because that is the big news. And is it going to be me taking an L for the predictions I made being wrong? Is it going to be me taking a W? We will see. We'll see. So let's take a gander. Where are we? Okay, let's give it a second. Let me just check the chat. We will see. And I'll give it a minute. So, I'm trying to think. So, if people want, I can do a video on DSP on Kino Casino. I didn't think there was really that enough for me to really go into much detail about it. I liked the interview. It was nice that they just did a normal interview. They didn't try to ambush him. They didn't try to screw with him. I think we got a bit more of a look at the real Phil Burnell, which is something that I appreciated. And I just hope things go well for Phil. I hope they don't try to screw him. I hope whole thing isn't one massive Giesler op. It probably is. They're probably setting him up to screw him over, but I want to believe. They say in X-Files, I want to believe that this isn't a Giesler op. I guess that's kind of the first thing. It pissed off a lot of detractors, so that's always something. But that happened. I was watching. I'm just doing some bullshit. While going, I was watching Kino Casino covered the whole Mr. Beast video. Now, I am proud to say I had never heard of Mr. Beast before I did the live stream on the Time Magazine Top 100 Most Influential People list, and I still barely know who Mr. Beast even is. I was learning quite a bit from that video they were watching. About the ex-employee who is going over how everything's fake. I actually kind of view it as like a power. Well, I don't have a power move, but I view it as like a good thing that I didn't even know who Mr. Beast was. To quote the AVGN, you might say it's living under a rock, but it's a rock worth living under. It's like how I'm kind of happy that I've never watched a TikTok or never watched a TikTok. I've never really been on Instagram, or I've never been on 4chan. I don't know. TikTok is just, you can call me Grandpa Argent, but it's just kind of cringe. I'm not gonna lie. So I'll just take a moment. I put up the review of Seven Samurai. People want me to do more movies like that. Let me know. I'm always happy to. I was happy to listen to feedback. Just because I listen to feedback doesn't mean I necessarily will do it, but I take it into account. Somebody told me they would like me to do less current events and go back to doing more other stuff. I can do that. It's just a lot of that stuff just takes a while, and I kind of have to be in the mood to do it. I've tried in the past to do a schedule. I'm gonna do an Is It Fascist? I'm gonna do a meta-political video. It's just, I don't know. I just find it hard to do that on any kind of set schedule. It's kind of just whenever it occurs to me. So I'll think on that, but no promises. I know I've switched over to doing a lot more just kind of current events and news type stuff. A lot of that, like I've said, is just because it's just fascinating to me to be able to cover some of this stuff in real time, to like watch history being made, to watch major wars happen and stuff like that. So yeah, that I think is a big aspect of it. So let's just take a look at the chat. Okay, nobody's there yet. Like I said, this one will probably be pretty quick. So the big news that we have been having is the Ukrainians have been launching an offensive, have decided to launch an offensive at Kursk. Now, let me just try to refresh my memory where Kursk is. It is over here. So the Ukrainians got together. Now, there's a lot of fog of war on this one. And I think it kind of does reveal, and they were saying this a bit on the Duran, how dependent everyone is on the Ukrainians for releasing information, because the Ukrainians don't really, because the Russians have pretty good OPSEC, and they generally speaking don't put anything out. And the Ukrainians have been largely silent as to their own updates in the last little bit. Let me see. Is there any... Okay, Kursk offensive map. Let me see if there is a map of what's going on, because I was trying to find one and a lot of them are down. So it is not reflected on Deep... Or is it reflected on Deep State UA? Maybe it is. It must just be a very small area. Yeah, I think that is... Yeah, okay. Oh, okay, sorry. I was just misreading because I'm retarded. Okay, so yeah, those are the areas. I like how it's liberated, even though this is part of internationally recognized Russia. Okay. So, let's take a step back. So, a couple of days ago... the Ukrainians managed to get a couple brigades together. I believe that this is mechanized. This is some of those elite divisions who keep getting rushed from location to location as the firemen of the front. And whenever there's going to be live UA... Oh, okay, there we go. All right. Thank you for that, Fritz. Okay. Where are we? Okay, here we go. So, they managed to get a couple brigades together, and they kind of just, like I said, from as far as I can determine and from what I've heard, this is not their strategic reserves. It's not as if they had a bunch of brigades back in Kiev or somewhere else who were in a position to exploit these kind of breakthroughs. What these are, to my understanding, is they just pulled brigades off from other places. So they pulled some guys out of Chesiv Yar, or they pulled some guys off of in the south or something like that. And they just weakened their defenses elsewhere in order to get some guys together to launch this offensive up in Kursk. So I have seen different estimates. There's a lot of fog of war. Like I said, the Ukrainian government hasn't really been putting out very much information, at least about anything other than Kursk. So we don't really know how the war is going on the other fronts. Like I said, Russia doesn't announce things until days or weeks after they actually take a location because of OPSEC. But yeah, so it looks like Ukraine has kind of gone in and they've taken what appears to be a significant amount of ground. And once again, the problem is, and G-Man I think is alluding to that, one of the problems that a lot of this faces is that the vast majority of information comes from Ukraine because Russia doesn't publish this stuff in real time. So take all of this with a massive salt mine. So this brings us to, I guess, kind of the big question. How did this happen? I had posted my update video like 4 or 5 days ago saying that Ukraine had permanently lost the strategic initiative and they could no longer launch major offensives. So was I wrong? Do I have egg on my face? Let's talk about it. So, firstly, how did this happen? And this is the big question. Russia has, at this point in time in the war, a massive advantage qualitatively and quantitatively. They're pushing on pretty much every front. I mean, if we just look at the map, just about everywhere. They're going forward. They're taking settlements on almost a daily basis now. And their pace of advancement is accelerating all the time. So, with that, how did this happen? Why was it such a mess up here? Now, the excuse that I've heard, and you can see it in the title, is that basically this is a button mash. So for those of you who've never played a fighting game, basically there's a thing called button mashing. So somebody who plays a fighting game for like one of the first time and doesn't know what they're doing, they just hit random buttons on the controller. And somebody who does that can occasionally beat a veteran player, like someone who's good at the game, because it's so like illogical, it doesn't make sense. You're trained to like play in a certain standard way, and the person just doing retarded stuff is just not something that you would even really think of. If you've ever watched like Bronze League Heroes or some of the people who do weird cheeses in StarCraft 2, doing really dumb shit will sometimes beat players much higher than you because they're used to standard builds, they're used to standard openings. It's kind of like in a boxing match, if the one guy just runs across the ring and tries to kick you in the balls, most of the time you're just gonna like deck him. But it's occasionally going to work, and it's probably going to work more. You're probably going to win more often doing that than if you were just a mediocre boxer and you're trying to play standardly. So what does this all mean? The point is that this doesn't really make much strategic sense. They only had, I think, 3 or 4 brigades, so I think there's like 4,000 to 6,000 men or so. There's some tanks and some infantry fighting vehicles, but there's just nowhere near enough to really make any kind of significant progress, and more importantly, to hold any of it. It's also very unclear what the strategic objective would even be. Kursk itself is a rather large city. Let me just double check how big Kursk is. Kursk. No, I don't want to hear about the Kursk submarine. I want to hear about the city of Kursk. Kursk. Kursk has a population of 400,000. So, I mean, there's no way that they're going to be able to... Oh. Okay, Marabella. Have fun doing whatever it is you're doing. Have a good weekend. Hope you enjoy the stream later. But yeah, so Kursk is a big settlement. They have nowhere near the amount of soldiers necessary to take something like this and to hold something of that size. So the general belief that I've seen is that they are attempting to take the Kursk nuclear power plant. Now, when Zelensky, not Zelensky, Podolyak, whatever his spokesman was asked, he said the goal of this offensive is to make the Russian people feel the fear that the Ukrainians are feeling, and to grab land prior to any sort of future negotiations. Which, once again, that doesn't seem plausible to me, because they're taking a bit of territory. Eventually, the Russian army is going to get there. And once the Russian army gets there in large enough force, they're going to throw them back across the border. This is a war that's been fought in a lot of cases similar to World War I. They're not going to be able to build any significant amount of fortifications in this area. I don't even know how this would work logistically. Russia can probably still just kind of cut them off because this is quickly turning into a salient. And there's always so there's that aspect to this. So the kind of the cope from the Russian perspective is this happened because Russia wasn't expecting them to do something like this because it's retarded and it doesn't make any military sense. So they weren't defending this area as well as they should have been. And they also weakened their lines elsewhere and redeployed troops that would be better put in those other locations at this place. So that is the Russian explanation. I think regardless of how we're going to put this, this is a total this is a failure. Like this is I don't think this is going to significantly alter the war in any way, but it is humiliating. It is humiliating that the Ukrainians just did this, that somehow like Russia couldn't figure this out. They couldn't rush people to this area in time. Now, I get that the front line is really long and it's hard to defend everywhere at once, but that's really not an excuse for not doing a more competent job. And it does look really embarrassing. Now, as for what Ukraine is actually doing, I think it's important to keep in mind that first off, take this with a massive salt mine. This, to my understanding, is territory where Ukrainian units have been seen. Now, this can vary from a brigade to one dude in a tank. So, if there's like a Ukrainian APC that drives through this area, it gets put down as occupied by Ukraine. Does that mean it's actually occupied by Ukraine? No. It doesn't mean that it's occupied by Ukraine at all. So I think that's the first thing to kind of keep in mind whenever we're looking at this. Like, if we go back and look at what happened in 2022, is it fair to say that Russia occupied this area? Like, because they did the big aero offensives basically just directly along the highways. So, like, could you really count this as occupied territory? Or the stuff around Kiev is occupied territory? I don't really think that you can. So I think when you look at this, you have to treat it a bit like that. Wherein I don't know if they're really capturing many settlements. In some cases, they might just be taking pictures of themselves outside of settlements and then moving on. Ukraine is a huge place that's quite flat. So, realistically speaking, and I get that this kind of is a cope, but it's probably not that hard to just find a place in a front line this long that's not very well defended and to just kind of rush across it and take a couple pictures and kind of just humiliate the Russians. But I don't... yeah. I don't know. As I said, I don't think that this is really a large offensive. I don't think this is going to have any strategic impact. I think what they did is they scraped together some units from elsewhere and they just rushed across the border. Now, I think the reason for there's a couple reasons for this. Firstly, stuff is going really bad in the south. Chasiv Yar, it's going bad in. I forget where the other place is they're fighting. Kurkov, I think it is. But basically, they're getting pushed back all along the front line at the moment. So it's going really bad pretty much everywhere at this point in time. So this is a distraction from that. This is Ukraine can go, look, guys, we got a massive W. We took Russian territory. We're winning. We're winning. It's something that they can sell to the Ukrainian army, to the Ukrainian people, and say, look, things aren't completely hopeless. We're still able to take territory. We're still able to beat Russia, at least locally. It gives them something to sell to their Western backers. Now, interestingly, if you look at what Western sources have been saying about this, a lot of them, including David Axe of all people, an Institute for the Study of War, and like all these pro-Ukrainian people are saying that this whole thing is a really dumb idea. They're pointing out correctly, in my opinion, that Ukraine doesn't have the soldiers for this, that Russia's going to show up sooner or later and kick them out. Russia's claimed that they've inflicted, I think, over 1,000 casualties so far. Once again, when it comes to numbers in this war, it's kind of a shit show. The only accurate casualty count we had was Media Zona, but basically the news was so bad from Media Zona that they opted instead to stop tracking stuff the proper way, and they switched to an algorithm that like dramatically increased the number of Russian casualties. Generally speaking, the Russian numbers are at least somewhat accurate. I think is the general agreement. The Russian numbers are somewhat accurate. The Ukrainian numbers are completely fake. Because keep in mind, Zelensky said only 36,000 Ukrainians have died. So let's just thinking about this rationally. Even if the Russians don't have a ton of ground forces in this area, they still have artillery, they still have aircraft. I'm pretty sure the Ukrainians weren't able to move up that much air defense weaponry to this location or any stuff like that. So I'm fairly confident that they are taking very heavy casualties. Now, yeah, because it's weird because the previous times Ukraine has done stuff like this, the West has been telling them to do it. But if you go through, and I can always go, if people want, I can always go and try to find some more examples of this. But if you look at what various Western people are saying, the normal cheerleaders are saying that this is a really bad idea. And they're admitting that this is some sort of a propaganda exercise. Because keep in mind, like, when it came to the spring, summer, fall, winter offensive, they had strategic reserves largely in place for carrying that out. They had gotten an army ready specifically for that purpose. They had supplies set aside that weren't actively being used. This is stuff that they pulled off of, like, another front to throw in here. So it's probably going to take a couple days, maybe a week, for Russia to clean this up. But once again, I think I said in my previous videos, Ukraine's still going to be able to launch local offensives or counterattacks. Ukraine still has a large, powerful army. The fact that I think we're in the final phase of the war doesn't mean that the war is going to be over anytime soon. It's just going to be, as I said, Russia gradually creeping forward, grinding down the Ukrainian army, taking settlement after settlement. We might get a couple minor counterattacks here and there, but it's really just until the Ukrainians break or Russia decides to launch a big offensive and try to break them. I still think at this point in time, the entire goal is to try to keep the situation from completely imploding before the November election. I think that's what they've basically been told. I don't know if Zelensky's been told they'll give him like 50 homes in Florida if he can hold off until then. Some people have said that this is kind of Ukraine's Hail Mary. This is their last gamble. That they think that this is going to destabilize Russia, that this is going to embarrass Putin, that this is going to force them to the negotiating table on Ukraine's terms. Once again, I don't think so, but that I think is the logic. And people have compared this to the Ardennes offensive. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, the Ardennes offensive, or the Battle of the Bulge, was a major offensive that the Germans launched, I think it was 1945. 1944, sorry. It's also known as the Battle of the Bulge. Good movie, by the way. They sing Panzerlied in the movie, which was pretty awesome. But the Germans basically got all their remaining reserves together and launched a big assault in attempting to split the Allied armies in pieces and defeat them in detail, and just in general to try to reverse the entirety of the situation. I don't think this is the Ardennes offensive, because the Ardennes offensive at least had resources behind it. I think this is a lot more like I think the spring, summer, fall, winter offensive was like the Ardennes offensive. This reminds me of this. This reminds me of Operation Spring Awakening, which was the last German offensive of World War II, which they launched to try to retake Hungary, to retake Budapest, and ensure access to the last oil wells that they had. Or like Operation Nordwind is the other one, Operation, which were just kind of the last desperate, we're just going to try something because we really have no other plan remaining. It kind of reminds me of those more than it reminds me of the Ardennes offensive or the Kursk offensive, ironically enough. But once again, that's how I feel about it. You can say that I was wrong. You can say it's a cope. Definitely, as I've said, regardless of whether or not this makes no military sense, and this is going to be a mess, and the Ukrainians are going to take heavy casualties, this is deeply and profoundly embarrassing, and it makes Russia look really bad. Now, Enduro says another thing, and I've heard this as well. There was a claim that some people thought that Russia was planning an offensive near Sumy. Let me see. Sumy. I kind of know relatively where things are, but I'm still kind of... Yeah, Sumy. Russia was going to launch an offensive in this area, so Ukraine just decided to launch a preemptive attack at the area. That is, to just go in before Russia was ready. Now, I had heard that Russia had removed its minefields and disassembled some of the defenses it had there to make it easier for their own troops to go forward. But once again, it's very hard to know in that war. So, Enduro, that's possible, but we don't really know for sure. That seems plausible to me, but it could just also be that this was a less defended part of the front line, and they decided that this would be a good PR victory. So that's where we're at. Otherwise, a lot of the other stuff just hasn't really been very... there hasn't been a ton of updates. All we've really heard is just Russia is continuing to advance. Every day we hear about more artillery systems being destroyed. Stuff like that. And I mean, once again, like, let's think about this for a minute. Who are Ukraine's main backers? The UK is currently going through riots and protests and a financial crisis. This is why Russia doesn't have to redirect troops from other parts of the front, because they already had troops planned for that region. Yeah, Russia has not had to pull anyone off. Russia also just has substantial reserves they haven't committed yet, so they can just throw those in to the meat grinder, as it were. What was I thinking of? Yeah, so UK is in a total state of crisis. Germany is going through an economic crisis. Germany has announced they're halving their contributions. And the US. Well, the US is the US, so this is all happening. Like, let's say that Zelensky was trying to get, like, America's blessing for this. He, like, calls in and he's like, I want approval for Kursk offensive. It's like, well, I don't know who we're supposed to redirect you to, Mr. President. Nobody's currently running the country. Like, maybe they forwarded. Like as I said, this is one of the things that like China in particular is really annoyed by. Who are you going to call other than Ghostbusters at this point in time? No one's running the U.S. Like, would Zelensky call Kamala? Would he call the Joint Chiefs of Staff? Would he call Stone Cold Lloyd Austin? Would he call Biden? No one's like running the show at the moment. So we have largely chaos in Ukraine's Western backers. At the same time as this is going on. Now, my understanding is China's actually very pissed off about this because they had the Ukraine's foreign minister, I believe, had recently gone to China and tried to get China to agree to be a mediator in the conflict. And China feels like Ukraine was just fucking with them and they had no actual plans on trying to achieve any sort of compromise or something like that. So that's where we are with Project Ukraine at the moment. Let's transition over to the situation in the Middle East, where we have Israel and Iran engaged in a game of geopolitical chicken. So, we have this is the whole like big question that we have at the moment. Is what's going to happen now? If something's happened like in the last couple of hours with Israel and Iran, please let me know, because otherwise I don't really I haven't really seen much. I think we're still waiting to see what's going on. So let's take a step back, and I know I say that a lot, but so what is the overall situation at the moment? So last week, Israel killed the leader of Hamas, who was in Iran to attend the inauguration of the president of Iran. Now, this whole thing is just one big 24-hour G-slur op, and we still don't even really know what happened. Because I've heard people say it was a rocket attack. I've heard people say it was a bomb. I've heard people say that it was the rocket was fired the day like he got there. I heard somebody claim that the bomb was planted there like 3 months ago, and there was some sort of 4D chess plan where the Israelis assassinated the president of Iran because they knew then that the leader of Hamas would be staying in this guest house, and so they had the bomb planted there before they assassinated the president of Iran because they knew he would. I don't know. I've heard all kinds of stuff. I don't think we really know for sure what actually happened. But yeah, so the leader of Hamas got assassinated, who was also, interestingly, the guy who was the head negotiator. So he was the guy who Israel was negotiating with. To try to get the ceasefire agreement. I believe his replacement is like is one of the ultra hardliners who's less likely to come to some sort of agreement with Israel. So that's good. That's good. That's where we are at the moment. So immediately after that, the entire collective West just went to Iran and they're like, look, Iran, you have to show restraint. Like this, you're going to escalate this war. You have to show restraint. You have to restrain yourself because, like, Israel's a good boy. Israel didn't do anything. You're the problem here. You shouldn't have allowed the head of Hamas to visit your country on a diplomatic mission. Like, what was Israel supposed to do? Not assassinate a foreign head of state? Like, Israel had to do it. I mean, I looked at AIPAC's Twitter. AIPAC's Twitter told me they had to do it, that he was a terrorist and they had to kill him. So they're like, look, Iran, if you respond to them assassinating a visiting head of state in your capital, that means this is all your fault. You're escalating And if you do that, you're going to be punished. So the U.S. has been sending, I believe, a couple carrier groups in. They've been threatening Iran. They've been like, Iran, if you dare to retaliate and you escalate, there's going to be consequences. There's going to be consequences if you attack Israel. And Israel's been whining about how Iran's coming after them. You know, there's a Russian proverb. The Russian proverb is, you know who will tell you what happened to him, he'll never tell you why. Which I think is very appropriate in this situation. Because Israel and AIPAC and all these guys are like, oh, well, Iran is going to attack us, Hezbollah is going to attack us. They're all coming after us. It's another show up, but why are they doing that? Oh, we assassinated a visiting head of state. Yeah. So the problem Iran is facing now is they're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So if they fire back at Israel, which let's just think about this for a minute. I know this is like a normie conservative thing. What if the situation was released? Let's say that Zelensky was visiting the United States and he was there for Kamala Harris's inauguration as the president of the United States, and Russian agents killed Zelensky with a missile. They smuggled in a missile. He was staying in like the guest house at the White House, and so the guest house gets blown up by a Russian missile, and Zelensky gets killed. How do you think the U.S. would have reacted to that? And I think that's a pretty accurate comparison, because you have two countries that are largely at war with each other. Then you kind of have a third part. Like, I think that is the equivalent. But yeah, so if Iran does attack and does try to do some sort of thing against Israel, they're dealing with Netanyahu, they're dealing with what's his name, the head of the religious Zionist party, they're dealing with Ben Gvir, they're dealing with like the crazy crowd in Israel, like the escalator crowd, the people who want to start World War III, the millenarians. So if Iran hits back, America has said we're going to go to war and defend Israel. You have all the neocons who want war with Iran. Biden, who probably wants war with Iran because it's going to be his legacy or something like that. The Israeli government, who wants war with Iran. So if they hit back, even if it's a proportionate response, they're going to trigger just insane stuff from Israel and in the United States. If they don't, though, because they don't want to start World War III, what tends to happen is the Western media just says they're pussies. It says they're pussies. It says they're weak. It says they're cowardly. And I'm seeing this all from a bunch of people on Twitter who are like, come on, Iran needs to go all in. They need to invade Israel. They need to just level the place. They need to just get this party started. And so Iran's kind of in a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation at the moment. So if you're the leadership of Iran, like, what do? Do you just take what is to me one of the like worst insults, acts of war, just fuck yous? And keep in mind, Israel assassinated this guy during ongoing ceasefire negotiations. They assassinated the other guy who was going up against him. Who was who they were negotiating with. So that happened. So they can respond to that, or they cannot, and then everyone will call them pussies, and they'll try to destabilize them and stuff like that. So it's very much the cries out. The whole thing is the cries out in pain as he strikes you thing, or as I like to put it, the IDF cries out in pain as they airstrike you. So I don't know what Iran's going to do. Now, Iran, I think, has been kind of playing chicken with Israel. Now, obviously, there's some back and forth. I think Hezbollah has been firing some missiles at Israel. Israel's been firing some missiles at Hezbollah. There's like the normal low intensity. So I think one interpretation is that Iran is playing mind games, and Iran is waiting for Israel to act. So what they did is they announced we're going to have a massive counterattack. They actually called it a special military operation. Yeah, well, they call it a special operation, but I like to think that it's a reference to the special military operation. Iran announced we're going to be launching the special military operation against Israel, and nothing's happened since then. So I think Iran might be trying to psych Israel out because they said they're going to do this, and then they just don't do anything, and Israel's just kind of freaking out. And they're like, what are they doing? Like, it's like in a movie or something like that where they go, someday I'll be there and I'll get you when you least expect it. Or like, I've planted a bomb, like I planted a bomb somewhere in your body, and at some point in time it'll go off. You don't know where, you don't know when. And it just creates this sense of paranoia. So if Israel hits Iran again without Iran having done anything, the optics of that are really bad. And it helps Iran in a diplomatic sense because it makes them look more like the victim. So I think that's part of it. Now, we recently had, let me see if I can find the statement, Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation had a meeting a day or two ago. A lot of people were suggesting that maybe the reason why Iran hasn't done anything is they were waiting for this. So this meeting was had on, I think this was Monday? Monday or Tuesday. And I'm just trying to find what the statement was that was issued. So some people thought what they're going to do is they're going to wait until this meeting happens. They're going to get all these other countries on board and give them something of a mandate, some sort of like international legitimization, to give them so they can be seen as the sword of Islam. Also, it gives them a whole bunch of cover. So let's see if this will load, and we'll take a look at what the statement was. Now, while that loads, the other thing that I have heard is Russia has been unloading a large or a substantial number of air defense systems in Tehran. Russia has been rushing in a whole bunch of their modern air defense systems, and they've been unpacking them, and I would imagine distributing them throughout the country. So that started happening, I think, on Monday. So Iran could also be waiting for those to be set up. So it could be that they do plan to counterattack, and so they knew they weren't exactly ready at that point in time. So they announced that they were going to do the special military operation early to try to psych out Israel. Well, at the same time, they have a plan, but they're not doing it until Russia gets those air defenses set up, and they had this thing. So let me see here. Do they not have the actual statement? I'm just trying to find what the actual statement is. I'm just trying to find it. But the Saudis and Iran aren't enemies anymore. They're both in BRICS now. Is Saudi Arabia in BRICS yet, or are they like still waiting to join? Yes, Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia is in BRICS. I find the whole. I'm not entirely sure. So I think they were invited to join, and then they said they were going to join, but then they didn't ultimately join. The whole thing is really weird. But okay, so the statement issued after an extraordinary meeting of the 57-member bloc said, Saudi Arabia said it holds Israel, the illegal occupying power, fully responsible for this heinous attack, which it describes as a serious infringement of Iran's sovereignty. Gambia's foreign minister, who chairs it, called it a heinous assassination. The aggression violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Islamic Republic of Iran by the assassination of a political leader on its soil is an act that cannot be viewed in isolation. This heinous act only serves to escalate the existing tensions, potentially leading to a wider conflict that could involve the entire region. So then Saudi Arabia said, blatant violation of Iran's sovereignty. Iran has promised harsh punishment for Israel. So the thing is, okay, so how much does this mean legally? This doesn't mean anything legally, but Iran now, if something goes forward and they decide to do some sort of vengeance or counterattack against Israel, they have this 57 nation bloc. They have this big bloc who's now given them. I don't think this exactly is permission to go to attack Israel, but they have an official statement from the global Muslim community, or the closest thing there is to a global Muslim community, saying that they're in the right, that Israel screwed with them, that they have the justification to defend themselves. So I think that was probably a wise political move. Once again, it gives them a little bit of a cover. It's the second largest intergovernmental organization. That's interesting. So my understanding of what the question that a lot of countries are facing is, what are they going to do? Because you have a couple countries that are Arab and are aligned with America and had okay relations with Israel, but the anti-Israeli sentiment is so strong at the moment, they're in trouble. So from my understanding, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt have said the area over their country is a no-fly zone. They will shoot down any military, any drones or missiles or warplanes that pass overhead. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But that is the position that they've taken. Saudi Arabia has said they will shoot down anything that goes over. Egypt has said that, and Jordan has said that. Now, this is largely a win for Iran, because if Israel wants to attack Iran, the logical place would be to go through Jordan and Saudi Arabia and probably the less populated parts of Iraq. If they're not able to go this way, they're going to have to go through Lebanon and Syria. which is hostile territory. I think it's also substantially longer to go that way, but they're going to have to go through like densely populated parts of Lebanon, densely populated parts. They're probably going to have to go over like that area. Iran can have some defenses set up there. I think it inconveniences Israel a lot more than it inconveniences Iran. Also, Syria and Lebanon are, or at least Hezbollah, are friends of Iran, so they can just bring their missiles like right up to here, right up to the border. It doesn't really matter if Jordan's neutral or not. It's a lot more of an issue. So I think that's Saudi Arabia's way of hedging their bets. That's Egypt's way of hedging their bets, and that's Jordan's way of hedging their bets. Egypt is in kind of a weird position because it's good friends with both America and Russia, and it's joined the BRICS now. Also, it's an Arab country, so even though it's had good relations with Israel for quite a while, but anti-Israeli sentiment is so strong among the Arab street, as it's known. It's kind of hard to know exactly what direction they're going to take. Jordan is in the position of being a U.S. ally, but being a country that's majority Palestinian, and having to face a lot of... Jordan's kind of surrounded by enemies. Egypt is on the verge of economic collapse. I haven't heard that. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I haven't really heard about a financial crisis in Egypt. Is that a result of the Houthis shutting down the Red Sea? By the way, just a random side note. So the Sudanese civil war is continuing. The weirdest thing about the Sudanese civil war is it's the Sudanese army versus the rapid support forces. The rapid support forces are backed by Wagner, but the Sudanese government is backed by Russia. So Wagner is backing one side and the Russian government is backing the other. It's really weird. I think the rapid support forces are probably going to win the civil war, but the whole thing is just a massive shit show. It's hard to explain even what's like going on there. My understanding is like Ukraine was deployed. I haven't really looked it up, but Ukraine has deployed special forces to Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. So I don't know, but it's all very tense, and it's very clear that Israel is trying to stoke a regional war. Now, there's a couple different theories for why this is the case. Now, when it comes to Ben Gvir and what's his name, is Egypt must be losing a lot of money though on what's it called? Wow, I just completely, my mind just completely died there for a moment. Well, that's embarrassing. Yeah, because of the shutdown of the Red Sea. The Red Sea being shut down, it must be causing a lot of problems. I'm just trying to find where it is. Okay, let's see. Knesset. I think it's the leader of Shah's. I'm just trying to remember because there's like the triumvirate that leads Israel now. It's Ben Gvir, Baby Netanyahu, and I forget who the third guy is. It's like Smelich or something like that. Smelich? There we go, Smordrich. Smordrich. Yeah, he's the third member of it. Smordrich. So we have these three guys who are in charge of it. Now, the question that we have is, on one level, I think it is that Netanyahu knows that if he gets shut down, if his government gets overthrown, if the war ends, he's probably going to go to jail for corruption and probably at this point in time for war crimes. Israel might decide to throw him to the wolves as a way of trying to get out of all the international trouble that they've caused. So there's that aspect to it. I also think that there's the whole what is it again? I do think Netanyahu is actually ideologically okay with this. I don't think he's nearly as radical as the other members of the coalition, but he's okay with this. He's okay with killing massive numbers of Arabs, of trying to start a regional war. So I think he's maybe not as ideologically committed as the rest of his coalition, but he's perfectly willing to go along with it, on the grounds that they're going to be able to. He's going to be able to stay in power and maybe secure his legacy and try to avoid going to jail. Because once again, he probably will spend the rest of his life in jail if and when he gets removed from office. Now, we had this incident. I'm trying to find it. So Netanyahu apparently yelled at the IDF and called them weaklings. This is according to the Financial Times. Okay, so let's see here. A dispute between Netanyahu and his defense chiefs burst into public view at the weekend. In public review at the weekend, when Israeli media led by Channel 12 News reported a vocal late-night exchange between the Prime Minister and senior security figures last week. "You're weaklings," Netanyahu was reported to have said on Wednesday. "You don't know how to manage a negotiation." Instead of pressuring the Prime Minister, pressure... I don't know who that is. Referring to Hamas's leader in Gaza. So, I like to think that he said that they were pussies, and then that was that's what he said. But I have to wonder. Apparently, the IDF has been increasingly trying to tell him no, like we don't have the resources for an invasion of Lebanon. We can't keep going. We have to come up with some sort of exit plan. I think there's a non-0% chance that there could be a coup at some point in time. I don't think it's very high. It might only be 5%, but I think there is a non-0% chance that the IDF could try to force Netanyahu to step down if this gets to the point of it being a wider war. I've also heard that Hamas has basically been rebuilding its armed forces as it loses different territories. Let's see here. Let me just look at Chet's There's a bunch of stuff in chat. Um, okay, nothing particularly important. So, it's a game of chicken. Now, there's some other stuff that, okay, so we all know about the riots against, wherein, so the IDF soldiers were running like a rape camp, and they got arrested by the military police, and then like a bunch of ultra nationalist Israeli politicians and ultra orthodox attacked the military base to try to break them out, to try to prevent them from getting punished. But it's actually apparently worse. It's actually like worse than what we thought. Apparently, they were live streaming this shit. Okay. So, let's take a look at this. Okay, there's a network of torture camps. The report, titled "Welcome to Hell," collects the testimony of 55 Palestinians who were detained by Israeli authorities since October 7th. Widespread torture. Israeli soldiers were sexually abusing a prisoner at the airbase, where thousands were being held. Said the abuse in Israel prisons is systematic, ongoing, and state-sanctioned. They have completely open field in terms of what they can do to the Palestinians. So, so there's an issue where so a bunch of the prisoners were getting raped, then they got arrested, and then it led to a group of far-right Israeli protesters and lawmakers trying to break into the military bases to rescue the soldiers who had been arrested for the rape. So according to this, let me find this, because this is like some supervillain shit. So according to this, okay, so where is this? In another interview conducted by the Israeli human rights group, an official in Hamas's Ministry of Youth and Sports describes not only being beaten by prison guards while in detention, but hearing about their brutal attack is being live streamed for Ben-Gvir, the Minister of National Security in Israel, to watch. If that's true, that is fucking amazing. That's I mean, and once again, this is Ben-Gvir. And I keep bringing him up because he's just like, he looks like the Jew from like a Nazi propaganda poster. Like, he looks like a supervillain. Like, doesn't he? He looks like a supervillain. So, allegedly, he has been... Allegedly, because he is the head of Israel's security services. So, he's been having them torture and rape Palestinian prisoners and live streaming it to him. Like fucking pay-per-view or something. Which... Now, this is something that liberals and Palestinians are saying, but it's hard because... Let me see if I can find it. The quote from him. Make lives of Palestinian prisoners worse. Yeah, this is the dude who has boasted about how he's making the prisons worse. and this is talked about like Matt. He wants to clear out Israelis' prisons by just killing all the Palestinians. Um, yeah, so he's bragging about how he's made the whole situation worse. So yeah, so it's being live streamed. We're live streaming for Ben Gavur, directly to Ben Gavur. Let's see here. So, is this something that the Palestinians made up, or did this actually happen? I don't know. I think it's like, do I think Ben Gavur is fucked up enough to want them to stream Palestinians being tortured so he can probably get sexual pleasure off of it? Maybe he does it, like watches it while he's with his wife. I'm sorry, that's foul, but I really have to wonder. I really have to ask the question. But it also sounds cartoonishly evil, and yet you did have the riot to try to prevent the protesters from being arrested. Now, I'm assuming that these are male Palestinian prisoners. So I guess like the ultra orthodox Jews are okay with like the IDF soldiers sodomizing Palestinians. Maybe because they don't consider Palestinians humans. It's not gay. It's an interesting question. I'm gonna have to, if anyone knows any Haradri rabbis, we can ask them that question. So that is pretty much all I really had to cover. I guess it still took about like an hour to get through it all, but yeah, we have the whole Kursk situation where we don't really know where it's going. I think it's just a temporary thing. Ukraine's going to get pushed back. I think it's their final throw of the dice. Or it's just a distraction. And then we have all the nonsense going on in the Middle East where Iran is planning something, but maybe they're trying to psychologically get Israel to hit them first. I'm not really sure. But that's, I think, covers everything. I hope people enjoyed the